it wouldn't be a federal matter anyway. State pensions are not a federal matter. Obviously, they're a state matter. The Justice Department might weigh in on that on a brief of some sort, like friend of the court kind of thing. But I probably wouldn't advise the Justice Department to weigh in on that one at all. If it's more of an individual rights issue or an incorporated constitutional amendment, like a Bill of Rights amendment that's been said to be a right possessed by the people, regardless of the sovereign, versus a non-incorporated right, which means a right possessed by the people under the sovereignty of the federal government. So non-incorporated rights can be violated by the states, basically. So if there were to be a case that came up regarding an incorporated right, I would instruct the Justice Department to weigh in on it for sure. But if it's an unincorporated right, I would probably afford the states their legitimate purview, as is the appropriate decision for the executive, regardless of how I feel about the specific law. So this is the thing I'm talking about. A good president, no matter how he feels about a given state's law, if he's competent, he first assesses whether that state matter is appropriately, whether it's currently considered to be under the purview of the state sovereignty, whether it's appropriately, according to the Constitution, considered to be under the purview of state sovereignty, and whether or not those two things are in alignment with each other. So accordingly, if they conclude that it's appropriately a state matter, then the president, no matter how strongly he feels about it, shouldn't do anything about it, right? It's not his job. Just like you don't want your school principal, the principal at one school, going over to the school next door and starting bossing kids around, right? It's like, that's not your school, fucker. Go back to your school and be principal there. What's your view on Common Core? It's a fucking nightmare. One thing I would like to see happen, although it probably won't, but I would test the waters to see how much capacity I had to do this, is get rid of the education department entirely. Why is there a federal education department? Education is definitively not within the purview of the federal government. I think Common Core is a disaster. I think if education were to be properly executed, it would be individuated to the students and to whatever extent possible by the students. Students should be driving their own education by pursuing things that interest them and running afoul of barriers of understanding or knowledge that prevent them from going further, then pursuing that knowledge or skills in order to get past that barrier. That's how education should happen, by an actual purposeful, I want to do but I don't know how, instead of the way it is now, which is, we want you to want to know Well, I don't give a fuck what you want me to want to know, right? It's like, you can force me to be educated in all these stupid things that maybe I care about one of them or maybe none of them or whatever. Or you could actually ask me, how do you think we could best serve your educational interests? Nobody ever thinks to ask the children, not just the children, but a child, how do you think, if you were ideally educated by us, that education would look? Nobody asks any child that. It always has to be so standardized, right? Well, standardization does one thing really well, and this is why it's so popular. It gives you empirics. So it's like, we're not getting any empirics on what's wrong with this healthy patient. Well, let's stab a few things in there and put some chemicals in here and, put those things over there and there. Now we're getting plenty of data. Oh, it's not looking good. Well, that's because the thing you're doing is no longer education. It's indoctrination or ontological forcing or something. Education is when an individual pursues skills or knowledge in order to go past a barrier produced by their lack of understanding. No children get educated as a consequence. Now, I'm not saying primary grades aren't important. I think every child should know basic arithmetic, subtraction, reading, at basic level writing, okay? But once you master those basic academic skills, those are the skills you need then to pursue your own education, especially now with the internet. So once I've been taught to read and write, I need to figure out what I want to do. It's not just playing. So on some level, most people have to spend at least some time not playing. Most people won't be happy if they spend all of their time playing. They want to do something that leaves behind some mark or something, right? So we need to convey basically a framework for children to understand their own ontology. Why am I here on this earth is one question, but how will I know if I'm living well is a more important question. And that requires anybody to ask the question, well, what do I want? What comprises the good? What would comprise the most realized version of myself, and so forth. If we're not talking about those things explicitly, then we have already shot education in the head by the time the kids leave third grade. Like, I guarantee you, most people here under 30 would learn more useful information by watching that many hours of talking with famous people than they would from taking that many hours of college liberal arts classes.
Oh my God. Seriously.
Of course, if you're gonna go to college because you want to be a chemist, then you're gonna have to take organic chemistry. And that's a different sort of thing, right? Organic chemistry is something that is worth taking a college class on because it's not reason-based, it's empirics-based. And so it has one way, you can learn it all. The information doesn't expire very quickly. What you learn in OChem 20 years ago and what you learn in OChem today may be different, but not many, but the basic stuff that was true back then is still true today.
Yeah.
So if you're learning skills and knowledge that you need to accomplish things like chemistry or whatever, great. Then you're doing the right thing with your college education. However, if you've never actually engaged any question that requires you to have chemistry to answer it, why are you taking chemistry? Well, because I want to go into sciences or blah, blah, blah. But why? Well, because it's whatever. The only correct answer is I'm trying to figure out the answer to question, yeah. Or because I want to, because I find chemistry easy and want to make a lot of money. I think biochem is a good place to make money. That's a fine answer too. But the problem is people are being educated before they have any concept of whether they want to be educated, how they want to be educated, what they want to be educated in, or what comprises education.
Yeah.
And then you end up with these ridiculous things like identity politics comprising humanities coursework. Of course, identity politics runs afoul philosophically
I think we're out.
of all axioms that we take seriously as important. In other words, it's never the case that we think it's a good idea to say you're just a meh, so you can be reduced to that. We never think it's a good idea to do that. And identity politics fundamentally violates that axiom, and yet still manages to gather up enough momentum to comprise a substantial amount of a humanities curriculum. I mean, what fucking bizarro world is this? Well, gender studies makes a little bit more sense because gender's a real thing. It's like, or sex is anyway. Now, gender studies is just a way of politicizing.
Yeah.
Again, same some rights violations or some individuals being oppressed with words, which is always bad to do. So gender studies is basically dumb, but it is true that chicks are subject to a particular kind of both ontological and actual violence that men generally aren't subject to. So there's stuff there that's worth studying. It's just that because the whole school study begins with let's talk about how blameworthy the blameworthy group is.
Well, yeah.
Then it's doomed to always fail to be useful or meaningful. In any sense. All right, let's go get weed.